You backstabbed me, you son of a bitch. I roared the words as I bolted upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. I spun around, eyes searching for the traitor, ready to tear him apart. But instead of a dark alley and a smoking gun, I found myself staring at a long row of men in crisp police uniforms. I froze. My brain went completely blank. What the hell was happening? Why was I surrounded by cops? Wait, I remembered the cold sting of a bullet. I remembered Sangue, that old bastard, catching me off guard with a sneak attack. I should have been dead. Did I survive? Did the cops pick me up from the scene? I looked down at my hands. No handcuffs. I reached back and felt my spine. No entry wound. No blood. I just stood there, paralyzed, trying to make sense of the reality shifting under my feet. Candidate. A young officer sitting in the middle barked, his face twisted in annoyance. This is a special recruitment exam for the police force, not an audition for acting school. State your name immediately. A special recruitment exam? Candidate? My mind raced. I didn't know what kind of game these cops were playing with me, but honestly, I didn't care. Anything was better than being dead at the hands of Sangue. I was an old hand at dealing with the police. I'd spent half my life in and out of stations. Habits die hard, so I reached into my pocket, pulled out a cigarette, and lit it up. I took a long, deep drag, letting the smoke settle my nerves. The room went silent. Every officer there looked stunned. A middle-aged man sitting in the center leaned forward. He didn't yell. Instead, he set his paperwork down and watched me with a flicker of genuine interest. AC, I said, exhaling a thick cloud of smoke toward the young officer who had shouted. My info is right there in your files, isn't it? Why are you asking me? The young cop turned red, his jaw tightening as he prepared to explode. But the middle-aged man, Officer Lee, held up a hand to quiet him. He gave me a faint, knowing smile. Candidate 225115, Officer Lee said calmly. To avoid any bias in this recruitment, I don't have your name on these files. I only have your temporary ID and your test scores. So please, state your name. Special recruitment. Temporary ID. Test scores. What the hell was going on? I'd been a street thug since high school. After graduation, I became what people call a social idol, a drifter. In the underworld of Liang City, I was a big deal. People called me Brother Nan out of respect. Since when was I a candidate for the police force? I stayed silent, trying to play it cool while I finished my cigarette. But as I looked down at the filter, my heart skipped a beat. There were 2 fish printed on the side. The brand was Jiqing. My stomach dropped. Jiqing cigarettes? These were nicknamed Campus Chunghua back in the day. They stopped making these 20 years ago. 20 years ago? Was it possible? I looked at my hands again. The jagged scar across my right palm, a souvenir from a knife fight years ago, was gone. My skin was smooth, full of the collagen of a young man. I had regressed. I was back in my younger body. Candidate 225115, the young cop shouted, losing his patience. Are you mocking us? Didn't you hear Officer Lee's question? I snapped out of it. I'd seen enough storms in my previous life to regain my composure quickly. I glanced at the young hothead, then looked Officer Lee straight in the eye. I'm sorry, officer, I said, my voice steady. The pressure of the interview got to me. I was nervous last night and didn't sleep well. I spaced out for a second. My name is Lu Nan. Lu as in the Great Road, Nan as in South. I took one last drag of the Jiqing, dropped the butt on the floor, and crushed it with my shoe. I didn't look nervous at all. That's enough, the young officer snapped, waving his hand in disgust. He turned to Officer Lee. Sir, this man is clearly unfit for the force. I think we can end this interview now. Officer Lee's lips curled into a mysterious smile. He passed the preliminary exams, and he's already here. Let's hear him out. I find him interesting. The young cop tried to protest, but Lee silenced him with a gesture. He opened a folder and looked at my scores. Lu Nan, Lee said, looking curious. You scored a 38 and a 42 on your theory and policy exams. Those are barely passing, but you got a perfect score in combat. Have you studied martial arts? I caught a glimpse of myself in a mirror on the wall. I looked so young, so raw. If I really was back in the past, the cops could look up my background in a heartbeat. There was no point in lying. Yes, I nodded. My father was a martial arts coach. I started training when I was 3. After middle school, I got into MMA. Officer Lee raised an eyebrow. A martial arts family. Interesting. He closed the folder. All right, Lu Nan. That's all for today. Go home and wait for the results. If you pass, someone will contact you. I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. Even though Officer Lee had been polite, he carried an aura that made me sweat. I dealt with cops my whole life, but this guy felt different. He looked like he could see right through my soul. He wasn't just some small-time precinct captain. Thank you, Officer Lee. I'll take my leave. I gave a small bow and hurried out of the office. I headed straight for the stairs. I just wanted to get out of there and process the fact that I'd traveled back in time. But as I rounded the corner, a sharp, mocking voice stopped me in my tracks. Well, if it isn't Brother Nan. I thought you said you had zero interest in being a cop? Not only did you take the prelims, but you actually showed up for the interview? I turned around. A girl about 16 or 17 was leaning against the railing, casually picking at her nails. She was gorgeous, short hair, delicate features, and long legs that even her formal suit couldn't hide. I stared at her, genuinely confused. Do I know you, kid? She reacted like I'd stepped on her tail. She snapped upright, hands on her hips, glaring at me. Hey, Lu Nan, don't you dare play dumb with me. My dad and Uncle Lee are best friends. I'm telling you right now, trash like you has no business in the police force. You're failing this exam. Period. I looked at this bratty, high-strung girl and scratched my head. I didn't have time for her drama. I only had 2 words for her. Dumb bitch. I didn't care about the police force. This special recruitment was probably just a setup to get some rich official's daughter, like her, into a cozy job. I was a veteran of the streets. I wasn't going to take crap from a little girl. What did you just call me? She shrieked, her eyebrows shooting up in rage. I didn't stick around to answer. I had a whole new life to figure out. I curled my lip and pulled out a cigarette, a smirk playing on my face. I was just calling out the idiot, I said coolly. If you want to claim the title, I can't stop you. Lu Nan, you're looking for death. The girl was beyond furious. Her face flushed red as she lunged at me, her long, toned leg whipping through the air in a powerful kick. She was fast, but she completely underestimated my reflexes. The moment she moved, I blurred to the side. Her foot whistled past my chest, hitting nothing but air. Before she could reset, I stepped in and clamped my hand firmly around her throat. Listen to me, I hissed, my voice dropping to a dangerous growl. I don't care who you are, and I don't care who your father knows. Don't ever mess with me again. My eyes were cold, filled with a raw, predatory intensity. For a second, I felt like a caged beast finally snapping its chains. The girl's eyes widened, her pupils trembling as she stared at me from inches away. She looked terrified. She didn't use her full strength during the sparring match yesterday. She must have been thinking, I can't even land a single hit on him. Lu Nan, a cold voice barked from the hallway. What is going on here? I glanced over. It was that young cop from before, the one who looked at me like I was dirt. He was scowling, his face twisted in disapproval. What do you think you're doing? Let her go. I gave him a bored look and slowly released my grip. I shook my head, sighing. Man, there are so many psychos around here today. What did you say? The young officer roared, stepping forward. I told you to let her go. Didn't you hear me? I heard you, officer. Relax. I let go of the girl and wiped my hands on my pants as if I'd just touched something filthy. I looked at her one last time. Little girl, the road is wide. You walk your side, I'll walk mine. But remember this, I don't care who your daddy is. Stay out of my way. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked down the stairs, leaving them both stunned in the hallway. It wasn't until I cleared the front gates of the compound and looked back that it hit me. This was the Provincial Public Security Bureau. I had just choked a girl and insulted a cop inside the highest police office in the province. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead, but a twisted sense of pride followed it. Damn, I thought, if I told my old brothers from my past life about this, my reputation would be legendary. Wait, I needed to know exactly what day it was. I fumbled in my pocket and pulled out a phone. It was an old-school Nokia 8210. My heart skipped a beat. I took a deep breath and punched in the unlock code. August 8th, 2002. The numbers hit me like a physical blow. I almost collapsed right there on the sidewalk. This was 22 years ago. I had really gone back. I was back in the days right after my high school graduation. I stood there in a daze for a long time, my mind racing. Finally, I couldn't help but swear out loud. Holy shit. It felt like a stampede of horses was charging through my brain. Wait, August 8th? I checked the time on the screen. 10:18 a.m. No, 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 no. I yelled, jumping up. I won't let it happen this time. I won't let my old man die. I sprinted to the curb and flagged down a taxi. Step on it, I shouted at the driver. I dialed my father's number over and over, but there was no answer. I was vibrating with anxiety, feeling like an ant on a hot griddle. I kept barking at the driver to go faster. In my past life, today was the day my father, Lu Yongqiang, vanished. He disappeared so completely that there wasn't even a body to bury. My neighbor, Annie Lee, had told me he received a phone call around 11:30 a.m. His face had turned pale, and he had rushed out the door without a word. At the time, I was a rebellious brat. I thought he'd just gotten sick of me and went off to find a new life. I didn't care. I actually felt relieved. But 10 days later, the police delivered a death certificate. They called it an accidental death, but offered no details. From that day on, I was an orphan. I remembered now. On this day 22 years ago, my father had begged me to take the police entrance exam. I didn't want a job, and I certainly didn't want to be a cop. I just wanted to hang out at the arcade with my deadbeat friends. I had lied to him, saying I was going to the exam, but I actually went to help a friend with a scam. By the time I got home that night, my father was gone. Not this time, I thought, my fists clenched so hard my knuckles turned white. Asterisk, if I can save him, I'll become a cop. I'll give up the streets. Anything, asterisk. The taxi screeched to a halt at the entrance of our apartment complex. I threw $30 at the driver and bolted. According to Annie Lee's timeline, I still had a chance. I took the stairs 3 at a time and reached our door. It was slightly ajar. Without thinking, I kicked the door wide open. A startled shout came from inside. I charged into the living room, but the sound of rushing air warned me just in time. A massive fist was flying straight for my nose. Crap, I ducked to the side and threw a counter kick aimed straight for the person's groin. The attacker grunted in surprise and shifted his weight, blocking my leg with his own. The impact sent us both reeling back a few steps. When the dust settled, I saw him. He was a burly man with thick muscles and a heavy beard. It was my father, Lu Yongqiang. Kid, your moves have improved, he said, narrowing his eyes with a small, surprised smile. Dad, my eyes stung. Tears blurred my vision instantly. I couldn't believe it. I was 20 again, and he was standing right in front of me, alive and well. Why didn't you pick up the phone? I choked out. And why are you crying? Pick up, he grumbled, looking at me like I was crazy. That's a Shinzhaoxing SIM card, boy. It costs 60 cents a minute to answer. Do you think I'm made of money? He paused, his expression darkening. Wait, did you fail the interview? Lunan, I've told you 1,000 times, you can't keep messing around. If you could just become a cop, you'd finally bring some honor to this family. Listening to his nagging was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. I wiped my eyes and forced a smile. No, Dad. The interview was perfect. The examiners loved me. I'm definitely getting in. I knew the interview was likely a disaster given how I'd behaved, but I didn't care. I just had to keep him inside. If I could keep him home today, I won. Suddenly, a phone began to ring. I looked at the clock on the wall. 11:28 a.m. My heart stopped. This was it. This was the call that made me an orphan. Dad, I shouted, jumping toward him before he could reach into his pocket. Don't answer that. Didn't you just say it's too expensive? 60 cents a minute to answer. I repeated, trying to sound helpful. It's too expensive, Dad. You should just hang up. It's probably a spam call anyway. My father, Lu Yongqiang, looked at me with total confusion. Spam call. Kid, what's wrong with you today? Since when did you start worrying about spam calls? You're acting weird. He ignored me and reached for the button. I panicked. I couldn't let him pick up. I lunged at him, trying to snatch the phone from his hand. Dad, don't. But my father had practiced martial arts for over 30 years. He wasn't some slow old man. With a quick twist of his body, he easily dodged my grab. At the same time, his thumb pressed the answer key. Hello? Yes, this is Mr. Longing for Happiness, he said into the receiver. I froze. Mr. Longing for Happiness? What kind of ridiculous alias was that? Oh, hello. A sweet, melodic female voice drifted from the phone. This is Happiness Magazine. We have news regarding the matchmaking profile you posted on our website. Do you have time to come to our office right now? The voice was incredibly seductive, like a siren calling from the shore. My father's eyes lit up, and his whole body began to tremble with excitement. Really? So soon? This is already the second round. Yes, the woman replied. We are looking forward to your arrival. Good, good. I'll get ready and head over right away. I stood there, completely dumbfounded. My old man was looking for a second spring? He was using a matchmaking site? And why the hell was he using such a cringy username? None of this made sense. My mind was a mess of confusion, but one thing remained clear. I had to stop him. If he left this house today, he was a dead man. I gritted my teeth. I had no other choice. As he hung up the phone, I stepped behind him and delivered a swift, hard chop to the side of his neck. He never saw it coming. Before he could react, his eyes rolled back, and he slumped forward. I caught him and lowered him onto the sofa. I let out a long breath. My father was nearly 50, but his martial arts training kept him in peak physical condition. Even though I hit him hard, it wouldn't cause any permanent damage. He'd just be out cold for a couple of hours. Sorry, old man, I whispered, adjusting his head on the cushion. Don't blame me for being a bad son. If I don't knock you out, I won't have a father left to worry about. I wasn't going to let him step a foot outside today. But before I could even finish that thought, the phone in his pocket rang again. I pulled it out. The screen showed an unknown number. My brow furrowed as I pressed the green button. Mr. Longing for Happiness? Have you left yet? It was the same sweet woman, but her tone felt colder now, almost mechanical. Not yet, I said, deepening my voice to mimic my father's gruff tone. I see. Since you are a premium member, we've sent a private car to pick you up. It's already at the entrance of your residential complex. Please board the vehicle immediately. My heart skipped a beat. This was 20 years ago. Cars were a luxury, not something a third-rate matchmaking magazine sent out for premium members. Even high-ranking officials struggled to get door-to-door service back then. Something was very wrong. I'm sorry, I said, still using my father's voice. Something came up at home. I can't make it today. Tell the car to leave. The line went silent for several seconds. When the woman spoke again, the sweetness was gone. Mr. Longing for Happiness, are you sure? You cannot cancel a scheduled match. If you refuse, you will receive a divorce settlement from our magazine tomorrow. Furthermore, all the romance points you earned from your previous match will be cleared. Are you certain you want to do this? Divorce settlements? Romance points? What kind of matchmaking service was this? Was he dating a foreign princess? Before I could wrap my head around it, she spoke again. Her voice was a chilling whisper now. If our records are correct, your son has just graduated high school. You are his sole guardian. Don't you care about his safety, Mr. Liu Yongxiang? I felt a sudden ringing in my ears. This wasn't a matchmaking service. This was a blatant threat. They were using my life to blackmail my father. Was he involved with a dating site or a terrorist organization? I looked at my father sleeping on the sofa and felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I had to stay calm. Wait, I said, trying to steady my breathing. Give me a moment. I have some private matters to handle first. Very well, she replied, her voice turning flirtatious again. You have 20 minutes. Please hurry. Our driver gets very angry when he has to wait. I hung up, my hands trembling slightly. I wasn't scared for myself. I had lived a long, violent life before this. But I was terrified for my father. I could sense the killing intent behind that woman's words. It wasn't the kind of anger I was used to from street brawls. It was a cold, indifferent disregard for human life. To her, we were just grass waiting to be mowed. I needed to move my father to safety, but I also needed information. If I went in his place without knowing the truth, I was walking into a death trap. I grabbed a glass of cold water, ready to splash it on his face to wake him up. Knock, knock, knock. A sudden, sharp pounding at the door stopped me in my tracks. Mr. Longing for Happiness? We are the staff from Happiness magazine. We're here to pick you up. My body tensed. They were already here? This wasn't a coincidence. It was a calculated move. I looked at my sleeping father. There was no time to wake him and get answers. Wait a second, I called out, trying to sound like him. I'm just changing my clothes. I'll be right out. I took a deep breath and pulled out my own phone to draft a message. I quickly typed out a message and sent it to my father's phone. I didn't have time to explain, but I needed him to stay away. I rushed into his bedroom and threw open the wardrobe. I grabbed a tracksuit and pulled it on over my clothes. I needed a disguise, a hat, sunglasses, anything to hide my face. As I dug through the back of the closet, my hand hit something strange. I pulled it out and stared. It was a full-body Spider-Man suit. Is he serious? I muttered. Cosplay. I shook the suit out, and my jaw dropped. Right in the middle of the chest, stitched over the spider logo, was a giant, gaudy red rose. I felt a headache coming on. My old man wasn't some kind of secret pervert, was he? I was about to toss it back when I noticed 4 words embroidered in the center of the rose: longing for happiness. I stood there stunned. This was his uniform. Was he actually going to blind dates dressed as a superhero with a rose on his chest? The embarrassment was physically painful. I could feel 1,000 imaginary horses trampling over my heart. But then I thought about the magazine staff outside. They weren't normal. If they expected a specific look, this ridiculous suit was my best bet. It was better to be seen as a lunatic than to be caught as an imposter the moment I opened the door. I gritted my teeth and pulled the Spider-Man suit on. I yanked the mask over my head, tucking my hair in. It was a bit stuffy, but it completely hid my features. If things went south, I'd just take out the staff at the door, wake my dad up, and demand the truth. I took a deep breath and opened the door. 3 people were waiting. 2 men, one in wire-rimmed glasses and another in a baseball cap, stood behind a woman. She was dressed in sharp office attire, looking elegant and professional, yet there was a flirtatious glint in her eyes. "Mr. Longing for Happiness," she said, her smile widening. "I see you've already put on your matchmaking outfit. You're very enthusiastic today." I let out a quiet breath of relief. I had guessed right. To keep my voice from giving me away, I just gave a cold, dismissive grunt. "Please, follow me," she said, gesturing toward the stairs. "The car is waiting downstairs." I followed them out. Parked at the curb was a high-end Mercedes van with blacked-out windows. My suspicions grew. No ordinary magazine company provided this kind of service. I didn't know where we were going, but I was committed now. I reached down and felt the cold steel of the short blade hidden against my forearm. That gave me a sense of peace. "Please, get in," the woman said, sliding the door open. I climbed into the back without a word. The van started moving, weaving through the city streets. I tried to look out the windows, but they were mirrored from the inside. They didn't want me to know our destination. We drove for about 40 kilometers. My ears picked up a familiar sound, the sharp, distant whistle of a freight train. We were in the south of the city. I knew Liang City well. The south was the only district where the cargo trains still ran. 5 minutes later, the van slowed to a crawl and stopped. "We have arrived at the matchmaking location," the woman announced. I hopped out of the van and froze. We were standing in the yard of a massive, abandoned factory. I heard the heavy iron gates groan shut behind us. "This way, please," she said, leading me toward the main building. The further we walked, the more uneasy I felt. The hallways weren't like an office. They were reinforced with steel plates and heavy bars. It felt like a high-security prison. We reached a massive iron door at the end of a long corridor. The woman turned to me. "Mr. Longing for Happiness, if you win this matchmaking competition again, you will receive a 20,000 yuan bonus. Good luck." Before I could ask what she meant by competition, she heaved the iron door open. A wall of sound hit me. It was a deafening roar of thousands of people screaming and cheering. I looked through the doorway and saw a massive, enclosed octagonal cage surrounded by tiers of spectators. My blood turned cold. This wasn't a date. It was an underground fight club. These people weren't guests. They were gamblers and bookies. And I was the entertainment. I couldn't believe it. My father had been doing this. He was a cage fighter? In my past life, he had been killed in a fight. I always knew he was strong. Even with my professional training, I wasn't sure I could beat him. So how could he lose here? If he could be killed in this place, then I was in serious trouble. "Good luck," the woman said, giving me a sharp shove. I stumbled into the cage, and the iron door slammed shut behind me, locking with a heavy thud. "Longing for Happiness. You better win, you bastard. I put everything on you." The insults and cheers blurred into a dull hum. The initial fear vanished, replaced by a massive surge of adrenaline. My hands began to tremble, not from terror, but from excitement. This felt right. A dark smile spread across my face under the mask. I didn't care who killed my father in the other timeline. In this life, I was going to be the one doing the killing. I gripped my hidden blade, ready for whatever came through the opposite door. Asterisk clang. 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 Asterisk. The sound of heavy chains rattling echoed through the arena. A massive iron crate was pushed into the cage from the far side. The crowd went absolutely feral, the noise loud enough to shake the roof. I stared at the crate, and my heart skipped a beat. Inside the bars were 8 massive dogs. They weren't small pets. They were Tibetan mastiffs, bred to the size of lions, their fur matted and their eyes bloodshot with rage. Suddenly, a voice boomed over the loudspeakers. It was the woman from the phone. "Mr. Longing for Happiness, these 8 beautiful ladies are your blind dates for the evening. If you can capture or kill all 8, you will have successfully completed your mission." The crowd erupted. The mastiffs began throwing themselves against the bars of their crate, snarling and snapping, their teeth inches from the wood. I realized then that when those bars dropped, I wouldn't be fighting a man. I'd be fighting a pack of monsters. The beasts lunged at me before I could even process the situation. I stood there, frozen for a split second, my mind racing. Was this some kind of sick joke? Black dog fights were supposed to be man against man. Since when did they turn into a blood sport between humans and monsters? A dark thought flashed through my mind. Was this how my father died in the other timeline? Was he torn apart by these 8 brutes? My throat went dry, and I swallowed hard. But fear didn't last long. It was quickly drowned out by a wave of pure, white-hot rage. To hell with this. I was going to slaughter every single one of these animals. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. I didn't know the rules of this place, but I knew my mission. To finish this blind date, these lions had to die. I looked at the staff member and gave a sharp nod. It was time. The man didn't hesitate. He pulled the lever, and the heavy gates creaked open. In an instant, 8 Tibetan mastiffs, each the size of a full-grown lion, charged out. Saliva dripped from their muzzles. To them, I wasn't an opponent. I was dinner. "You think I'm scared of you?" I roared. "I killed 80 people in my past life. You're just dogs." I slammed my right foot into the ground and launched myself into the air. As the lead dog closed in, I swung my left leg in a powerful arc. My boot connected squarely with its skull. The beast let out a pained yelp and tumbled across the floor, rolling several times. The other 7 dogs saw their leader fall and went berserk. They snarled, their eyes glowing with primitive hunger, and circled back for a coordinated strike. Even the one I'd kicked scrambled back to its feet, joining the pack. They had one goal: to eat me alive. "Tough bastards," I hissed, diving to the side. I was a fraction of a second too slow. A set of claws raked across my right shoulder, tearing through skin and fabric. I hissed as a sharp, burning pain flared through my arm. Instinct took over. I lashed out with a kick, sending the attacker flying, but the remaining 7 were already closing in. Their eyes were bloodshot, fixed on my throat. If I survive this, I told myself, I am going to murder everyone at this marriage agency. Every single one of them. The pain fueled my aggression. I stopped caring about my wounds. As one mastiff lunged, I blurred into motion, stepping into its blind spot. I wrapped my left arm around its thick, furry neck in a vice-like chokehold. The dog thrashed wildly, its tongue lolling out and scraping against my cheek, leaving streaks of slime and blood on my skin. I didn't let go. I dragged the thrashing beast toward the edge of the cage. With a primal grunt, I jammed its massive head between the iron bars of the octagon. "Die!" I screamed. The dog struggled violently, but I put every ounce of my strength into my arms. There was a sickening crack as its neck snapped. The massive body went limp and slumped to the floor. I stood there, chest heaving, staring down the remaining 7. "You want some too? Come on." The dogs hesitated. Maybe they were mourning their pack mate, or maybe they were actually terrified of the monster I was becoming. They let out low, mournful whimpers, backing away slightly. Outside the cage, the crowd was losing their minds. People were screaming, jumping out of their seats. "Did you see that? He strangled it with his bare hands," someone yelled. "This is way better than the regular fights." The dogs recovered their nerve quickly. They fanned out, preparing for a final, desperate charge. I didn't feel nervous anymore. I felt cold. I reached for my blade. I didn't care if weapons were allowed. If I stayed unarmed, I'd be eaten. I needed to settle my father's debt. I grinned, a jagged, terrifying expression. As the 7 dogs leaped simultaneously, the crowd gasped. Some women turned away, unable to watch the impending slaughter. "Go to hell," I shouted. I leaped into the air, my hand blurring to my left sleeve. I drew my short blade in one fluid motion and hacked downward. The steel whistled through the air. Slash, slash. The throats of the first 2 dogs were opened wide. A spray of hot, crimson blood erupted, coating the floor and my clothes. The crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and confusion. Suddenly, the woman's voice crackled over the speakers again. "Mr. Longing for Happiness, the rules state no weapons." "Screw your rules." I barked back, not even looking up. "Those rules are for people. You didn't tell the dogs they couldn't use their teeth." I didn't wait for a reply. I charged the remaining 5. The blade became an extension of my arm. Thrust, cut, rip. I buried the steel deep into their flanks and necks. The air became thick with the copper scent of blood. The dogs were desperate now. They ignored their wounds, snapping and clawing at me with suicidal fury. The octagon turned into a nightmare of flying fur and red mist. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was a massacre. I felt like a machine. My vision was tinted red, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wasn't afraid. I was exhilarated. I was covered in so much blood, mine and theirs, that I looked like a demon crawled out of a pit. The crowd was hyperstimulated, their primitive instincts triggered by the carnage. "Kill them, Spider Boy. Finish them." The speakers stayed silent this time. The organizers realized the crowd loved the violence too much to stop it. The customer is king, after all. I let out a loud, manic laugh. My eyes were bloodshot, glowing with a frantic light. Killing dogs is harder than killing men. I yelled. I reached up and ripped the blood-soaked mask off my face. My features were smeared with red, unrecognizable to the audience, but the gesture drove them into a frenzy. "Do it. 10,000 bonus if you kill them all," someone screamed from the front row. I gripped my knife tighter, glaring at the last of the beasts. "Keep your money," I muttered. "I'm doing this for fun now. You think I give a damn about the money?" Lunan let out a jagged laugh. I took the mask I'd just ripped off and used it to bind the short blade firmly to my right hand, wrapping the fabric tight until the steel felt like a part of my bones. I didn't care about the prize. I just wanted to slaughter every single one of these dogs. I didn't waste another second. I lunged at the nearest mastiff. Thud, thud, thud. A series of heavy collisions echoed through the cage. In the blink of an eye, I sent the beast flying with a barrage of kicks. Before it could even land, I was already swinging the blade at the others. The sound of tearing flesh filled the octagon. Squelch, rip, blood sprayed across my chest. 3 more of those massive dogs collapsed in rapid succession. Their eyes bulged, blood leaking from their maws as their bodies gave a few final, pathetic twitches before going still. One of the remaining dogs seemed to snap. Driven by pure instinct, it charged me with suicidal recklessness. It licked its lips, baring yellow fangs as it flew through the air. "You're asking for death," I hissed. I was in a state of total frenzy. I didn't think. I just reacted. I met the beast head-on and drove the blade upward. Crack. The steel sliced through the jugular and buried itself deep into the bone of its neck. The mastiff let out a choked whimper and its head sagged. But it was so heavy that as it fell, the weight of its massive body yanked the knife right out of my hand. "Crap. He lost his knife," someone in the crowd yelled. "Spider Boy is done for." The last dog standing was clearly the alpha. I'd noticed him earlier, circling the perimeter and avoiding the main chaos. He was smart. He'd waited for me to tire out. "I never liked this kid anyway," a gambler spat. "Kill him. Bite his head off. I've got 1,000,000 riding on this." The arena was a chaotic mess of screams and bets. Half the crowd wanted me to live. The other half wanted to see me torn apart. But as the alpha and I squared off, the noise began to fade. We stared at each other, 2 predators with blood-red eyes. It felt like 2 swords clashing in the air. Slowly, a heavy silence fell over the octagon. I felt a strange smile creep onto my face. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a crumpled pack of cigarettes. I stuck one between my lips and flicked my lighter. Click, click. It was useless. The mechanism was soaked in blood. Within seconds, the cigarette in my mouth turned damp and red, smelling of copper instead of tobacco. Damn it, I muttered, spitting the blood-stained cigarette onto the floor. It landed right in front of the alpha dog. The beast lowered its head, sniffing the ruined tobacco. Then, it threw its head back and let out a roar so loud it vibrated in my chest. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated savagery. The crowd leaned in, expecting the final gore fest. But then, I shouted a single command. Down! The mastiff froze. It actually trembled. It raised its head slowly, looking at me with eyes that were no longer just murderous, but confused. I said, sit down, I said. The madness had left my voice. I was calm now, deadly calm. I stepped toward the beast. The dog let out a low growl, baring its teeth, but its legs began to give way. It lowered its body to the floor. I walked right up to it and reached out my hand toward its massive head. The alpha tried to recoil, but when it met my cold gaze, it whimpered. It lowered its head and even gave its tail a tiny, hesitant wag. I rested my palm heavily on its skull. No way. A voice gasped from the stands. He tamed it? That's the king of dogs. That beast fights wolf packs for fun. One gambler was losing his mind, screaming about his lost million, but I didn't look at him. I looked down at the dog. You're being obedient now, I whispered, but that arrogant look you had earlier really pissed me off. So, you still have to die. Maybe the dog sensed the sudden shift in my killing intent. It lunged, snapping its jaws toward my throat. You idiot, the gambler laughed. There goes my 3 million. Die, spider boy. The dog's teeth were an inch from my neck when a dull thud rang out. My fist connected with its underbelly in a perfect inch punch. The king of dogs was sent flying, crashing hard against the iron bars of the cage. It tried to stand, its eyes filled with a final, confused glaze, before it collapsed for good. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, the speakers crackled to life. The winner of this match is Mr. Longing for Happiness. The arena exploded. Cheers, screams, and applause crashed over me like a wave. I didn't care. I collapsed onto the blood-slicked floor, leaning my back against the cage. I was exhausted, but I was smiling. I had saved my father's life in this timeline, and I had settled the debt from the last one. The bite marks and scratches on my body didn't even hurt anymore. The iron gate groaned open. A woman in a gold mask stepped into the octagon, carrying 2 thick stacks of cash. Mr. Longing for Happiness, congratulations on your victory. Here is your prize. I didn't look up. I didn't know if she had seen my father's face before. Even if she hadn't, she'd know he was an older man. I was covered in blood, but she could still tell I was young. If they realized I wasn't Lu Yongqiang, I was dead. I had no strength left to fight. I let my wet, gore-matted hair fall over my face. Thanks, I said, keeping my voice deep and cold. When can I leave? She didn't seem to suspect anything as she handed over the money. Please wait a moment. Your injuries, they look quite severe. We're going to give you a rabies shot now, the woman said, her voice steady behind the gold mask. No need, I grunted. Just get me a car and get me out of here. I took the 2 stacks of cash. I didn't care that the blood soaking my clothes would ruin the bills. I shoved the money into my waistband, gripping the iron bars of the octagon for support. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to stand. Very well, she replied, nodding. Wait here while we arrange transport. I'll notify you about the next matchmaking event. Be ready. She turned and left the cage. I used my sleeve to wipe the stinging sweat and gore from my forehead. A sharp pain flared in my shoulder, making me hiss through my teeth. Damn, that hurts, I muttered. I limped toward the exit, clutching my left arm. As I passed the large iron transport cage, I stopped. The bodies of the 8 dogs were piled inside like trash. At the very top lay the king of dogs. Its leg gave a tiny, reflexive twitch. I stared at it, surprised. My inch punch hadn't killed it. I was about to keep walking when the beast let out a faint, pitiful whimper. It opened its eyes and looked directly at me. In that moment, I felt a jolt in my soul. Its eyes weren't filled with rage anymore. They were full of despair, helplessness, and a bone-deep fear. I never thought I'd see such a human expression on an animal. It reminded me of myself back in the old timeline, the moment I found out my father had been killed by the ghost-faced man. I must have looked exactly like this. Two staff members approached to wheel the cage away. Wait, I said, fighting the pain in my chest. What are you doing with them? Oh, Mr. Longing for Happiness, one of them said, his voice unusually polite after seeing me kill. These carcasses are useless now. We're taking them out back to be buried. This one isn't dead yet. I pointed at the king of dogs. The other worker laughed. Doesn't matter. They lost. Even if they're breathing, they get processed. This one is crippled anyway. It's easier to just bury it with the rest. A chill ran down my spine. I realized then that my father had likely been treated the same way. In the last life, he wasn't just a loser in a match. He was useless property to be discarded by these monsters. Anger flared in my gut, but I suppressed it. I pointed at the dog again. Give him to me. The workers exchanged a confused look. They didn't have the authority to decide. If you want that piece of junk, you can have it. The masked woman's voice rang out from the shadows. She stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. But I'm curious. What do you plan to do with a half-dead dog? I forced a cold, cruel smile. I'm badly hurt. I'll stew him while he's still got some breath in him to nourish my body. If your driver is fast enough, the meat will still be fresh. The two workers turned pale, shivering at my words. The masked woman, however, simply nodded as if I'd said something perfectly logical. Fair enough, she said. You too. Help him load the dog into the car. The workers didn't dare argue. It took both of them to haul the massive beast out of the iron cage. Even near death, the king of dogs struggled, its teeth baring and snapping at their arms. Quiet, I barked. Move again, and I'll kill you right now. The dog instantly froze. It went limp, allowing the men to bind its legs with rope and carry it toward the exit. I followed them closely, unwilling to stay alone with that woman for a second longer. We emerged from the tunnel into the golden light of dusk. The sunset hit my face, making me feel like I'd just returned from another world. I looked at the blood on my hands and thought of the people inside. Those animals. I'd make sure they paid for this. Suddenly, my skin crawled. A sharp, icy sense of danger washed over me. I snapped my eyes open and scanned the area. There was just the driver and the two men loading the dog into the back of a black Mercedes van. No, something was wrong. My instincts were screaming. I looked at the driver through the window. He had a twisted, mocking grin on his face. He reached back, his hand clawing toward my throat. Die, I warned. I didn't have time to think. I dropped to my knees, leaning my weight forward, and drove my elbow into the man's spine with everything I had left. There was a sickening crack. His spine shattered instantly, and he slumped into the seat like a rag doll. Before I could breathe, a siren wailed. A mechanical megaphone boomed a phrase I knew all too well from my past life. Don't move. You are surrounded. Put your hands up and surrender. My heart hammered. Without thinking, I dove into the back of the van. It was a reflex from my previous life, a muscle memory I hadn't lost even after being reborn for less than a day. Rat-tat-tat. Bullets peppered the side of the van, sparking against the metal. Stay down. Don't move, or we will fire. I peered out the window. A group of police officers were ducked behind a corner, weapons aimed straight at me. Wait, why was I hiding? I hadn't broken any laws. I'd just killed some dogs in self-defense. Don't shoot, I yelled at the top of my lungs. It's a mistake. I was just here for a blind date. I haven't done anything illegal. Shut up. Hands where we can see them. Get out of the vehicle. The police didn't lower their guns. They weren't buying the blind date story in the middle of a deserted wasteland. Besides, this van was a target they had likely been tracking for a long time. Fine. I'm coming out. I shouted. Don't shoot. I'm heavily injured. If I bleed out, that's on you. I raised my hands and prepared to step out of the sliding door. But then, a figure blurred past the side of the van. A man from the factory lunged into the front passenger seat. He kicked the unconscious driver out of the way, slammed the door, and screamed at me. Close the damn door. He floored the accelerator. The tires screeched, smoke billowing as the heavy Mercedes roared to life and tore across the dirt. You son of a bitch, the two workers outside screamed. They had been left behind as human shields. They tried to run back toward the factory, but a volley of gunfire cut them down in seconds. From the police line, a commander's voice roared over the chaos. Damn it. Team 3, get in the cars and chase them. SWAT. breach the factory, and lock it down now. The police were determined to wipe us out. They weren't letting anyone escape this lawless hellhole. I heard the officers shouting orders back and forth as they scrambled into their patrol cars. Engines roared to life, and the chase was on. I turned my attention to the man behind the wheel. He was still wearing a black hood, hiding his face completely. I didn't need to see his eyes to know who he was, though. Only a desperate gambler would be driving like this. I clenched my fists, ready to knock him unconscious. If I handed him over to the police, maybe I could earn some credit and clear my own name. I lunged forward, but the man spoke first. His voice was gravelly and full of rage. "You little bastard. You've really grown some balls, haven't you?" I froze. That voice was hauntingly familiar. "You actually dared to knock your own father out?" he barked, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "And then you had the nerve to take my place at that damn blind date." The man ripped the hood off his head. I stared in absolute shock. It was my father, Lu Yongqiang. "Dad? What the hell are you doing here?" My eyes were wide, my mind racing to make sense of the carnage I had just survived. "You idiot," he cursed, glaring at me through the rearview mirror. "You almost got me killed." He glanced back at the floor of the van, and his expression shifted to disgust. "And what is that thing? Why is there a half-dead dog bleeding out next to you?" I looked down at the mangled Tibetan Mastiff twitching at my feet. I didn't even know where to start. How could I explain that I had just butchered its pack in an octagon? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. "Forget it," my father snapped, shifting gears. "We need to lose the cops first. If they catch us, we're both dead meat." He slammed his foot onto the accelerator. The heavy black van lurched forward, screaming out of the industrial park and onto the main road. My heart hammered against my ribs. In the distance, the faint wail of police sirens grew louder. They were gaining on us. I looked back, watching the flashing lights flicker against the dark horizon. Every second felt like an eternity. I was trapped in a high-speed chase with a father I thought was dead, a dying beast, and a trail of blood behind us that led straight to the gallows.